Aboro, Aboye, Aboshishe, and welcome to our Fridays live at Iere Ijuba Ode Otun. Today, of course, we're going to do the normal readings, and we are also going to discuss some aspects of the history of Trinidad. But before I get into today's lesson, let me open with the Iba. Ope nifu olorun, olodumare oba jiki, mojiloni, mowogun meriaye, Iba ila orun, Iba iwo orun, Iba ariwa, Iba gusu, Iba oba egba aye, Iba orun oke, Iba baba, Iba yeye, Iba she, Igungun kiki igungun, Iba she ori, ori inu, pori, atuwa orun, ashe, ashe, ashe. All right, today I want to talk a little bit about some of the old and ancient history of Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to highlight a few important historical facts about this island that we know as Trinidad. All right. Kairi or Iere was the original name of the island that was misnamed or misnomered Trinidad. Iere, which was a suitable appellation, meant in the indigenous language, land of the hummingbird. This island appears from archaeological evidence to be very old, as remains were discovered in the southwestern part of the island that was dated to being 5000 BC. This finding of the remains is known as the Banwari Woman. All right, and it is stated that the skeleton of this woman showed she lived in Trinidad 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. A petroglyph embedded in the upper flank of El Cerro de la Ripo at 940 meters, which is 3,084 feet. It is at the highest point in Trinidad. It is written in a long forgotten language, which some believe is as old as 40,000 years. In St. Vincent, Grenada, Guadeloupe, and several other Carib islands, these stones exist. Columbus did not discover Trinidad with the Santa Maria, the Nina, and Pinta, the fleet he used on his first voyage to the Americas. The Santa Maria was wrecked off Hispaniola in 1492. The ships on his third voyage were the Guaya, otherwise called El Nao, the La Castilla, otherwise called the Los Vaquinos, and the Santa Maria de la Gorda, otherwise called the Olcorio. All right, the island Kairi or Iere was already peopled by various groups of people from various parts of the Americas, such as the Orocas, otherwise pronounced as Araucaos or Arucas, and Oroks, the Nopoyos, the Yaos, the Chacomarao, the Chaimas, the Chaguanis, the Siboney, the Caribs, the Carina people, the Kalina, the Kalinagos of Florida, the Guarajun, otherwise normally referred to as the Warahun, the Igneri, the Loconos, the Lucayans, the Nopoyos, also called Nipoyas and Nipojos, the Pariagotos, okay, the Quaquas, the Salives, the Tamanaks or the Tamanacos, the Tacarib, the Tibitibis, the Sepoyas, etc., etc. All of these groups were here before Columbus. Among all these groups, there were two major divisions called the Caribes or Kalina, called Caribs for short, and the Araquaques or Igneri, called the Arawak. The name Kairi would connect the name Carina, Cariana, and Kalina to the Caribs, being the group for which the island was actually called. The indigenous Caribs in the Caribbean were called by various names, such as Garifuna, Garinago, Kalina, Kalinago, Garifuna, Califuna, Califunan, etc. These Kalina or Black Caribs originated in St. Vincent and Dominica. It is stated on the historic records that two Spanish slavers wrecked while en route to Brazil, and the first in Bequia in 1635 and another in 1795, resulting in West Africans who were integrated into the Tiano society, creating a new group of people, later identified as Black Caribs or Kalina people. It is a known fact that slaving routes came nowhere close to St. Vincent, so the possibility of such is quite unlikely. However, it is a known historical fact that West Africans settled the Americas since 1311, and North Africans were trading in the Americas since the ancient times. The Garifuna or Black Caribs can be found in St. Vincent, the Grenadines, Dominica, Honduras, Belize, Nicaragua, Guatemala, in the US and Canada, as well as right here in Trinidad. All right, and I would stop that portion of the historical reading that speaks of the early, very early history of this country and the indigenes who some of us are partially descended from. All right, so I'm now going to do my regular reading, which comes from basically two books, and each week I give context. So I will talk a little bit before I start reading from Immigration into the West Indies in the 19th Century by K.O. Lawrence. What this book highlights is the labor situation in Trinidad and other Caribbean islands just around and after the time of emancipation, which would have been 1834. The situation was the plantation owners and the former slave masters needed to acquire a new source of labor because they did not want to pay the Africans a living wage. So as a result of which, they imported persons and brought them into Trinidad and other Caribbean islands to work as indentured labor or contract labor. All right, and so far we have discovered that we had persons coming from many different parts of Europe, Asia, India to work as indentured persons in Trinidad. All right, so we're going to continue reading now from Immigration into the West Indies in the 19th Century by K.O. Lawrence. In the British West Indies, most estates promised free medical attention to immigrants as early as 1841, but many estates were beyond the normal reach of doctors, and those voluntary medical arrangements were not very successful, as is evidenced by the vast incidence of sickness among